Hello everyone, this is Sergey Sputnikov speaking. Welcome to another episode of Ushanka Digest. Ushanka Digest is a collection of my previously published videos on the same topic, and today's videos are all about bus service in the Soviet Union, city buses, intercity buses, the cost of the rides, and the type of buses we used in the Soviet Union. Enjoy the show.
Hello comrades and welcome back to the Ushanka Show. First of all, I would like to share the great news with you. I just had my very first book published. It's called American Diaries 1995, and it's a story of me coming to America first time ever in 1995. I came to USA on exchange program to work in a summer camp here in Michigan, and I did that for 4 summers since 1995 till 1998. So this first book is based on my diaries that I kept in the summer and the fall of 1995 while I was working in a summer camp for inner city kids from Chicago, and then I worked at a local farm picking apples and peaches. So this book is out, and if you are interested, of course, this book is on Russian. So if you know Russian, or you'd like to learn one, or you just want to maybe get yourself a souvenir, this book is available for purchase. If you live in USA, you can buy directly from me. It's only $12 including shipping, and it will be signed. If you live overseas, not in the United States, the best way is to purchase through lulu.com. I'll put the link to that website, to my book, below this video in the description. So great news, I got my book published, American Diaries 1995. And now back to the life in the USSR, the story of the small boy named Serozha. And we talked for a while about my life in the village with my grandparents, and I'm about to come back to the city, back to Kiev. But before we start our conversation about Soviet schools and Soviet kindergarten, I would like to dedicate this story about transportation, because the one part I missed is how my family and other families were getting from the cities to the villages. And I think it's a pretty interesting topic. It's how the Soviet Greyhound system worked, pretty much, Soviet buses. Of course, because not many people had their own cars, we had to use public transportation, and when you go between cities or between city and a country, the options were pretty limited. It would be a bus or a train, or you just try to hitchhike, which was pretty hard because not many people had cars, and not many cars were on the roads. So this is how my family was heading out for the village. Now, we lived in Kiev, as I mentioned before, and the village was located around 240 kilometers north, so which is about 190 miles, give or take, in the northern part of Ukraine, not far from the border with Russia and Belarus. I remember those days when we were getting ready. My parents will take vacation at the same time, and in Soviet Union, people had 1 month, 30 days of paid vacation. So they will pick, for example, like June, and in June my summer holidays start. There is no school anymore, and first thing we'll hire a taxi. There was only twice a year that my family would use a taxi service. They will be heading to the village and coming back from the village, because bus was leaving pretty early from the central bus station in Kiev, around 7 a.m. or 6:30 a.m. So we just couldn't make it to the bus station using regular bus, city bus, because it took about an hour to get from our place in Chokolovka all the way to the central bus station. So we had to order a taxi. So early morning, around 5:30 a.m., there'll be a taxi, Volga 24, waiting by our house, by our building. It's not our house. We'll load our luggage and head out to the bus station. And interesting, I still remember this one time, I probably was maybe 6, maybe 7-year-old. I was still very young. But when the taxi was leaving our driveway by our building, a guy made a sharp right turn, and for some reason his door wasn't shut properly, so the door got open wide, and bunch of coins, bunch of change spilled on the asphalt. And I just remember that it was really weird. He slammed the brakes, started cursing, got out the car, and started picking all that change. There was a lot of change he spilled on the floor. So that was my memory about taking a taxi. And then it takes about 20 minutes, so by the bus it'll be about an hour, but maybe about 20 minutes to get to the central bus station, where we'll be taking a bus heading to Chernigov. Central bus station in Kiev was always a busy place. As I remember, there will be a lot of buses line up, loading people and then heading out different directions. And we will purchase tickets, bus tickets in advance. So about maybe a week or 2 weeks prior, my parents will go to the bus station and purchase tickets for that specific day. Between Kiev and Chernigov, we had a really nice bus called Icarus 255. It was made in Hungary, I believe. That was probably the best bus in the USSR. It was so-called soft bus, so it had a soft, comfortable seats. It fit 45 people. It had a pretty powerful 250 horsepower diesel engine, so that was a pusher. And it was really tall, had big windows, and was the most comfortable bus I ever experienced. So that would be the bus we'll be taking between Kiev and Chernigov. The other option, there was so-called hard bus, which had hard seats, so it wasn't like plush and soft ones. And usually those were buses made in Ukraine, made in Lvov, called LAZ. But we would always have Icarus, which was very nice bus. And of course, when you purchase a ticket, it will have a number, which is your seat. The distance between Kiev and Chernigov is 140 kilometers, so that's about 90 miles. And usually it will take a bus around 3.5 hours to get from Kiev to Chernigov. Of course, the bus had no air conditioner. Not a single Soviet bus in Soviet times had air conditioning. So the only way to get ventilation going, if it would be a hot day, we had little tiny sliding windows in the bus, or there will be several roof lids, like a ventilation lids you can pop open to get fresh air going. The problem that design was really basic, so you can have that lid or shut or wide open, and really didn't have like a adjustable positions. So if the people got really hot and they open one of those lids, then if bus is going pretty fast, for our roads it was I think speed limit was about 40 miles an hour, so the wind will be blowing pretty hard inside of the bus, so people sitting close by that vent, they'll get cold, so they'll try to shut the lid, and then people in the back will get too hot, so they coming back to open the lid. And that's quite often we had things happen. I call it lid wars or vent wars, and people start arguing, almost fighting, because some people are begging to open the vents, other people say no, close them because my kid is right here, he'll get sick from this wind. Maybe people will swap places. I remember one time a guy just covered himself with a jacket to stay protected from that wind, but that was the only way you can get ventilation going, is through the tiny windows, all those big lids on the top of the bus. So those 140 kilometers, 90 miles, it took so long to get from one place to another because our roads would be going through the villages. So it's like historical road connecting two cities, and the villages popped along the way. So every time every 10 kilometers or so be another village, and there'll be speed limit, let's say 25 miles an hour, so bus had to slow down, then pick up speed again for another 15-20 minutes and slow down again. So that's why we were moving so slowly. Then somewhere in the middle between Chernigov and Kiev, there was a bus stop for 30 minutes in a small town called Kozilets. And what I remember about that town, there was a small kind of sleepy bus station, and the bathrooms were the worst bathrooms I ever seen anywhere, or I ever smelled, I would say, anywhere. I had to hold my breath, ran inside, used the bathroom, and run out because the stench was just terrible. And if you had to go number 2, you pretty much have to squat over the hole in the concrete floors. There'll be several holes and no private walls between, so you kind of squat next to the guy who is squatting. And of course you need to bring your own toilet paper, and there's other people coming in, they see you squatting while they doing number 1, taking a leak in this little concrete channel by the wall, which kind of naturally drains into the hole in the ground. And whoever was cleaning that place wasn't doing a really good job, and they were using a lot of chlorine dumping those holes, so it literally will make your eyes water to walk in that bathroom. So that's my memory. First stop on the way to the village, because I'll be very excited to go home to the village for the summer break, and then was horrified because I had to use that bathroom. So we finally would arrive to Chernigov. It's a way smaller city. It's a very old, ancient city, Ukrainian city. And we'll arrive there about 11 a.m. and arrive to the central. Maybe there was the only bus station in Chernigov, and then we have to switch the bus. Now, next ride will be from Chernigov to Shors, which is more north, about another 70 miles north, 70 kilometers, about 50 miles. So once we arrived to Chernigov, we had to race inside of the bus station, get in a line and try to purchase tickets between Chernigov and Shors. And this time we'll be riding Soviet-made bus, LAZ, so-called hard bus. And those buses, they weren't as good as Icarus. They were more smaller size, could fit only 41 person, had hard seats, and had a 8-cylinder gas engine that had only 180 horsepower, so it was a pretty weak engine. The bus was called LAZ 695. So comfort level was way worse, and that bus was called Dushegubka. It's the same word that we use describing those gas chamber trucks that Nazi Germany used in the concentration camps, the sealed chambers that killed people with exhaust fumes. Well, this bus was doing that to people because the back seats would get so hot because the engine was right under them and ventilation was so horrible that bus was called Dushegubka. And of course there would be another set of vent wars when people fighting opening lids or closing lids. So that'll be our next ride. Now Chernigov is a very cute town. Had a beautiful train station which is right next to the bus station, and the bathrooms were underground and they were a little bit better, less smelly. So that was my memories about hanging out in Chernigov, and we'll wait another couple of hours in that bus stop before we could hop on the next bus and head out to the town of Shors. So if we are lucky and manage to purchase tickets, and I want to mention, I never remember empty seats on these buses. Buses were always packed full, and sometimes the drivers were trying to make extra cash. They'll pick people along the way. There'll be people standing on the side of the road trying to catch a ride, and that was kind of illegal. So there'll be also controllers, and there are some spots on the highway that bus is supposed to be stopped, and the person will come in and check, make sure we have only proper passengers with tickets and that the driver doesn't make extra cash. But they still were doing it, picking up people along the way and make some extra money for themselves. So that will be around 5:30, 6 p.m. when we finally arrive to the town of Shores. There'll be even smaller bus station, and again my parents had to run inside, get in the line, and purchase tickets for the final push, final ride, which is about 30 kilometers, around 20 miles, to get to the village. Well, in this place, they would be selling as many tickets as they could. There would be no seat numbers assigned, and just try to get in the bus. So that bus also will be LAZ, will be packed full. People will be just cramming themselves as hard as they could. And of course, we had bags because we're going for the whole month for the vacation. And that'll be our final 1 hour ride from Shores to the village. So about 12 hours later, so it'll be around 6 p.m. we will finally arrive to the village. So to cover the distance of 190 miles, we will spend all day from early morning hopping a taxi in Kiev, and we finally get to the village around 6 p.m. Extremely tired, sweaty from stuffy bus ride, but we'll be fine on the village. Then of course when vacation is over and time to go home, there'll be another whole day project going back. We have to hop on the bus, walk about 2 miles to the little bus stop in the village, ride it again on the buses, and then we'll take another taxi ride when we're back in Kiev, because all the heavy bags will be way too hard to use the city bus. So that's how the project of going to the village to cover this funny distance of 190 miles. These days things changed a lot. Central bus station in Kiev is no more. People who go in that direction north of Kiev to Chernigov and other areas, they just go to the outskirts of Kiev, and that's where a lot of private buses like Sprinter passenger vans sitting there. You pay the money. Those vans are flying fast, and now if I want to go from Kiev to the village, it takes about 4 to 5 hours max. It's really fast, really easy. It's way more expensive, but it killed the state-owned bus lines. As I said, the Kiev bus station is no more, and every time I drive by that small bus station in Shores, which is now named Snovsk, they changed the name back to original pre-revolution name. That bus station looks very sad, almost abandoned. And I remember it was always packed. There was always people there, old grandmas coming from bazaar. There was people from early morning till late evening, and now it's like literally empty. Hardly any buses going around, and everyone is having their own car or take those private charter shuttles that take you way faster from one place to another. And also I forgot to mention that later on, in middle of 80s, they actually opened direct bus ride from Kiev all the way to Shores using Icarus bus. So it made our life way easier. We didn't have to be stuck in Chernigov and try to buy tickets again. We'll just get on the bus in Kiev at about 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. and then we arrive right into Shores 5 hours later or so, and then we have to just hop on the bus from the town of Shores into the village. But before that, there was really hard day to get from one place to another. Well, so that's a story about Soviet public transportation, how we used the buses to get from Kiev to the village. I also planning to make a video about trains, but that'll be my next video. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Ushanka Show, stories about life in the Soviet Union. And speaking of boys and girls, still male audience is at 94.1% and female audience of Ushanka Show just 5.6%. Recently I made a video about my experience with Soviet Greyhound Intercity bus service, and today I would like to tell you about bus ticket prices as well as my experience of riding a car. There were a couple times I was lucky enough to ride a car from my village back to Kiev, so we're going to talk about that today. And just a friendly reminder, all my videos about Soviet public transportation are located in a separate playlist, and link will be below in the comment section. So here's the example of the Soviet era intercity bus ticket, but before we talk about prices, I need to remind you about different types of intercity buses. There were two categories of intercity buses, мягкий и жесткий, and I translated a while back incorrectly. It's not soft bus and hard bus, it's plush bus, just like mattresses, and firm bus. So here's the interior of жесткий автобус, firm bus made by LAZ, and I believe LAZ buses were the most common buses in the Soviet Union, and especially in the firm category. And of course, bus tickets were cheaper for the firm buses. And Hungarian made Ikarus 250 was the most comfortable plush bus. As you see, interior is way more comfortable. It was wider, taller, and quieter. And of course, chairs were way more comfortable and they could recline. LAZ, which is a bus factory located in western Ukraine, in Lviv, also manufactured plush style buses, like you could see these pictures taken by Uncle Bill in Baikal area. So they were also more comfortable, but not as good as Ikarus. Okay, now since we're armed with the knowledge about plush and firm buses in the Soviet Union, let's take a look again at our bus ticket. Okay, so it says полный билет, full ticket, or детский, children's ticket. So if you take a child with you, child is 50% off. You still have to buy him a ticket, but it will be 50% off. Full price, it's полный билет. And it's a full ticket as well, полный билет. Then it says from the station to the station, so that's where the person that sells you a ticket will write the names of towns. In my case will be Kiev to Chernigov, or later Kiev to Shors. And then it says жесткий автобус, so that's your firm bus, место номер, so it's the number of your chair, of your seat, and then отправление, what time your bus is departing. Hour time, and then day and the year. And the left side of the ticket was a bunch of numbers. It's we'll look at it a little bit differently, but it's zones, distances, and the cost. Okay, so that's the same ticket but vertically. So you got first numbers are zones, поясы from 1st to 21st. Second is расстояние, distance, so it starts from 1 to 5 kilometers and goes all the way to between 100 to 110. Once again, it's the so-called firm bus. Then you have price, children's ticket, rubles and kopecks, R and K, and then full price, once again, ruble kopecks. So for adult to drive, take a bus and ride it for 100 kilometers will cost 1 ruble and 58 kopecks. And 1 ruble 58 kopecks is pretty much 1% of your monthly salary in the Soviet Union, because people were making around 150 rubles in 1980s. And now we're looking at plush style bus ticket. And I apologize, this scan is not as good. I couldn't find any better quality. So once again, full ticket, children's ticket. The only difference, it says мягкий автобус. Date looks like it was 1984. And on the left we have again zones and prices. And zones goes as far as 25th zone, which is between 140 to 150 kilometers. So based on these numbers, the cost of taking a plush bus Ikarus from Kiev to Chernigov, which is 140 kilometers, was 2 rubles 90 kopecks per adult, plus Comrade Sergei, who was a little kid at that time, another 1 ruble 45 kopecks. That's just to Chernigov. And using the same price grid, taking a Ikarus bus from Kiev all the way to Shors, which is now called Snovsk, it's about 210 kilometers. We're talking about 4 rubles 10 kopecks per adult ticket. So I ran some numbers, and it looks like for my family, so 2 adults, 1 kid, to travel from Kiev all the way to the village, and it's using plush bus, then a last leg of 30 kilometers of firm bus, would set our family back 12 rubles one way, 24 rubles round trip, and that's about 16%
of my mother's or my father's monthly salary. So for example, if you're making $4,000 take home a month, it's like $640 round trip for 3 people on the bus. So based on the Soviet plush bus price grid, 160 kilometers, which is 100 miles, will set you back exactly 3 rubles. Which means if you take a Soviet plush bus Icarus, hypothetically from Chicago to New York City, which is 800 miles, it will set you back 24 rubles. And I just checked current prices at Greyhound website. Same trip, Chicago, New York City, in a plush style Greyhound bus will set you back about $100. The cheapest ticket's about $80, the highest $160, so we'll just call it $100. And this is what I found out comparing apples to apples, Chicago to New York trip based on distance and prices, that paying 24 rubles for this trip when your salary is 150 rubles a month would be the same if you make $625 a month and you pay $100 to travel from Chicago to New York City, which means or Soviet salaries were extremely low, or our bus ticket prices were extremely high. If you read my book American Diaries 1995, you may remember that I took that bus. I traveled from Benton Harbor, Michigan, all the way back to Chicago, and then all the way back to New York City in the fall of 1995. I did exactly the same trip again back in 1996. So I'm familiar with that bus ride, and I'm planning to share my experiences. I'm gonna read you that part of the book in my next video. Okay, now let's go back to the Soviet Ukraine circa 1984. That's when I traveled by car for the very first time from the village back to Kiev. I think it happened 1984, maybe 1983. So by then, my grandpa Sergei passed away. So my grandparents traveled to Kiev to spend the winter with us, and my grandpa got sick on the way to Kiev. I mentioned that story a long time ago. So he died, and then next summer, Grandma and I traveled back to village, and that's where I spent all summer with her, again in the village without Grandpa. And in August of that year, something horrible had happened. It actually was my fault. So my buddies and I were exploring our barn, and we found old kerosene lamp which still had liquid. So being kids, we were curious if that old kerosene still can catch fire. So we dumped the contents on the grass, and one of my friends lit the match, and that kerosene, started burning brightly. It was like late at night, late in the evening, so there was bright flames, and my grandma saw flames out of the window. She was inside the house, so she ran, screamed at us, and I think that stress caused her a stroke. So technically, it was my fault, and later my mom told me that you should understand that you killed your grandmom, and I felt really bad about it. So my grandma, after the stroke, was feeling worse and worse. So I had to get in touch with my parents in Kiev and tell them, hey, grandma is like not doing well. So my mom came, and then when she confirmed that the situation was getting worse, it was my grandma, she telegrammed my dad, and he found a friend with the car to go and pick us up because grandma just was not in shape to travel back to Kiev by bus. And of course, back then there was no cell phone, no internet. I mean, no one had telephone in that village except like the postal office and the collective farm office. So we didn't know what my dad could come up with, and suddenly early in the morning one day, like 8 o'clock, there's a car stopping by our house, and it was my dad's friend in his Niva car. And I'm planning to make a separate video about these cars. So it was made at Vaz factory, same factory was making Zhiguli, but this was a 2-door, like a small SUV type car. It was extremely expensive, all-wheel drive, and I discovered later that it wasn't selling really well because it was small, really thirsty on gas, non-practical, just 2 doors, and the price was, I think, like 11,000 rubles, so close to the Volga price points. So those cars weren't selling well, and that actually the government had to reduce prices to get them moving. And as I mentioned earlier, we had no idea when someone will come to pick us up. So that was this crazy rush because a guy showed up. He's like, okay, we gotta go, pack your stuff, and we're driving back to Kiev. So we literally had to, grab whatever we could, put in the car, lock the house, and we drove back. So that was first time ever in my life that I traveled from the village all the way back to Kiev by car. And that was interesting. And I actually remember that ride a little bit. I was on the front seat, my mom and grandma were in the back seat. And I remember a guy talking about the car. I think my mom was slightly envious because, my dad's friends owned cars, and we even didn't dream about buying a car. I mean, we had no money whatsoever. And he's just telling, like, well, my wife really wanted Volga, but there was a waiting list, and Nivas were available right away. So I talked to her into buy a Niva, and she doesn't really like it, except at one time we had to drive, off-road, and she saw how I just plowed through the fields, and she's like, Volga would probably get stuck, right? And like, yeah. So I kind of remember that conversation, but otherwise wasn't really comfortable riding because it's like a little SUV and really noisy and super cramped. But we were back in Kiev maybe 4 or 5 hours, and I remember that was actually a huge disappointment for me because village was my paradise. Summer, forever summer, no school, no homework, and usually my trip back to Kiev was torturous 12-hour trip. So like you're paying the price to returning from paradise to normal life in the city. And here was literally in the morning I was having breakfast in the village. Around 1 o'clock in the afternoon I'm already in Kiev, and I felt almost like violated. It was just happened way too quick. So mentally I was still in the village, and suddenly I'm in Kiev. So that car ride was actually a huge disappointment. Although it was cool to be in the car, it happened so fast, the trip, that I just didn't feel right. Then a couple of years later, maybe in 1986 or 87, even when Chernobyl exploded, we went to the village in July and August. My cousin went with the Zimetra. He borrowed the Zimetra from somebody, and our village got lucky. The Chernobyl cloud missed our village, so that was pretty clean. So we went again for the summer, and my cousin Sasha Alexander, by that time he bought a Moskvich, and he drove to the village with my dad. He brought my dad with him, and they did some repairs in the car. And then when it was time to go back, I rode with them back to Kiev. And this photo was actually taken in the morning where we're heading back. And this is my friend Igor, who used to live in Chernigov, the town that we used to drive through on the way to the village. And as I said, summer was about over, so he needed to go back home to start school. I needed to go home. And we took him along and dropped him off in Chernigov right next to his apartment building. And I remember it was the first time I appreciated having a car. It's like, wow, how convenient it is to have a car, because usually if you travel by bus, you get to the central bus station, right? And then you need to spend another, 40 minutes to an hour using public transportation getting back home. In this case, we dropped off Igor right next door to his apartment building. And that's, I think, first time ever this is really cool to have your own car. And of course, my ultimate trip in Ukraine by car was back in August of 2019, when I went all the way and I rented a car in Boryspil airport. And the only issue is to find a car with automatic transmission. I'm ashamed to admit that I don't drive manual. I learned how to drive in America when I was 27. It was automatic transmissions, so that was a big challenge to find a car with automatic transmissions in Ukraine. And I didn't want anything fancy like SUV, whatever, so we rented a small Hyundai. As I said, it had automatic transmission and power windows, power locks only on the front doors. So front passenger and driver doors had power windows, power locks. Back doors had manual crank. That was hilarious. So I drove this car from Boryspil near Kiev all the way to my village, and it took us like 4 hours, and that was amazing. It was amazingly stressful as well, because Ukrainian drivers are pretty wild. I had to watch like a hawk. It was stressful on that part, but we had air conditioning, so I cranked the air, so my kid was sleeping in the back seat. No issues. We just drove, arrived to village so fast, and of course it was bizarre for me because this road was always familiar, but I was always in the bus, never in charge, never being a driver. So there was totally different experience to actually drive this road that I knew since my childhood. Another hilarious part, so just as we left airport, and it's 2019, and I remember I just living in the airport, and the first thing you see living in the Boryspil International Airport near Kiev, there was this huge sign advertising the strip club in Kiev. And I was like, who in the world would let people do that? It was like the first impression of foreigners arriving to Ukraine, hey, there's a strip club, the men can have a lot of fun. And then you drive past this dealership that sells Porsches and Bentleys. So, it's just bad. It gives a really wrong message about the country. And when I was looking at the Google Maps trying to find the best route to get from the airport, back to my highway going to Chernigov, it gave me this back road that will catch up the bypass around Brovary. And that bypass, there was a spot where it was a giant pothole on my way, and I couldn't swerve into the incoming lane because it was a semi-truck coming. So I ended up hitting that pothole so hard that the stereo fell out, and I thought I messed up the tire. So I look at my son like, kid, we already arrived. It was literally like less than 5 minutes on the road, and I almost wrecked the car because of that pothole. So then, of course, I had to be super careful and slow down. And yeah, that was an interesting start. And another great, unusual experience was having a car while we were in the village. So now we had so much flexibility and mobility. If we wanted to go grocery shopping into town 30 kilometers away, no problems, hop in the car. And I remember one time, I said to my mom, like, hey, you want to come with us? So I asked my kid, like, hey, do you mind to sit in the back seat? Because I want mom to be in the front. And she looked so proud, like sit in the front seat next to her son, like, we're doing fine. So yeah, we would drive to Snovsk to do shopping, and my kid liked to catch Pokemons. And of course in Ukraine there was unique Pokemon, so he would spend a couple of hours running around catching those silly things. And we go to different town. And then when my brother was ready to come and stay with us for a weekend, he was still in Kyiv working, I drove to Chernigov, which is 100 kilometers away, picked him up there. We went to McDonald's because my kid wanted a little break from Ukrainian cuisine. So we stopped at McDonald's, then my brother showed up, he took a bus from Kyiv, then we drove back. Then on the Monday morning, then I drove him back to Chernigov again. So yeah, having a car was amazing. And I just wanted to say a couple of words about this picture. I believe I mentioned it before. So it was kind of cool to see in Snovsk this old 1980s Ford Econoline, right? And what I discovered about this van, that's actually people used it to smuggle fuel from Russia. So that's before the full-blown war. So those Econolines have 2 tanks, and it's a diesel, right? So these guys swapped the engine. They removed the original Ford diesel and install Mercedes Sprinter engine, so way more economical. And then they will have just a little bit of fuel to get to Russia across the border. And in Russia, diesel fuel was way cheaper. So they will refuel their van completely, both tanks, drive back to Snovsk and sell diesel to the local gas station. And they will do like 2 trips a day, so that will be, I don't know, maybe about 40 miles one way, and they will make enough money that they don't have to work. All they do is just 2 trips a day, and by the law, by the rules, if you drive the vehicle that has original OEM tanks, not extra tanks installed, you're allowed to drive through without paying any tax. So they were just shuttling every day from Ukraine to Russia and back, and making money bringing diesel in this giant Ford Econoline fuel tank. But of course, we're talking about 2019. Everything changed in 2022. Okay, my friends, so it's all I have for you today. And in my next story, I will share my experience about Greyhound bus traveling from Michigan to New York City. I'm just gonna read you parts of my book. So I think it'll be kind of interesting and to discuss that too. Otherwise, thank you for watching Ushanka Show. Please don't forget to give me a like if you like the story. Your super thanks always appreciated, and we'll talk to you soon. До свидания. Goodbye. We're right now at the small town of Snovsk. That's kind of like original town when my mother village is located. And it's funny, my kid was hunting Pokemons around here, and this place was called the Lost Lenin of Ukraine. So that was one of the last Lenin monuments still existed, but apparently people came from Kiev or maybe Western Ukraine and they knocked it down. So this is the place where the Lost Lenin of Ukraine was still located.
Здравствуйте, дорогие товарищи! В эфире программа Ushanka Show. And in today's video, we're going to talk more about Soviet public transportation and more specifically about Ukrainian-made LAZ buses, which were produced in Lviv, Western Ukraine. And a friendly reminder, if you're interested in this topic, I have a separate playlist called Soviet public transportation where you can find all the videos about buses, taxis, trains, and airplanes. Link will be below in the comment section.
Again, the Soviet Union was a fucking shithole with a ton of lipstick on its ugly face. And the fact that you keep reposting this crap here doesn't serve you well. There are a lot of crappy places in the US. You're right, but the USSR was a shithole with a handful of nice places instead. I know you're trying to monetize the excitement naive Americans experience towards the fucking Soviet Union, but deep inside, even you know that you're lying. You can bullshit the hell out of some very naive Americans, but I can see it for what it is. The propaganda bullshit. Shame on you.
So recently I posted this picture on the USSR subreddit on my favorite Reddit, and it shows the picture taken in Minsk, which was the capital of Soviet Belarusia, and now it's the capital of Belarus. And I said that the picture was taken in late 70s. I think I was wrong there, but the color confused me. I might guess it's another American tourist Kodak slide. So anyways, I talked about Laz bus on this picture, and we used to call it Dushegubka, the soul killer. We'll talk about it later as well. And that comment made a lot of people extremely upset. So here's the example. You may recognize this Redditor, Neduard. He already posted some really not nice comments about my posts. As always, the guy cannot post a thing without lying. This is LAZ 695. It is. It has been designed as a city bus. Not really. We'll talk about it later. It has never been called Dushegubka in masses. It was called Marusia. I never heard that name. By drivers. And bus by everyone else. Duh. It is mostly massively produced bus in the world. 250,000. If it was such a soul killer, an example of Soviet negligence of regular people, how come it was produced until 2010? Well, there was a different laws produced till 2010. So we'll talk today about this LAZ 695 bus and why we used to call it Dushegubka. What's interesting about Laz bus that despite the fact that design changed over the years quite often, and back in 1976 it changed quite drastically, the model number remained the same. It was always LAZ 695. They just changed the letter after the number. So what used to be, for example, LAZ 695M in 1976, totally new model, totally different look, was still called LAZ 695, but now it was 695N. And some of you recognize this bus. It was shown in HBO Chernobyl show, and I don't know why, but this combination of white and dark blue color was extremely popular. That's how I remember the Intercity buses in the northern Ukraine. And here's the screenshot from HBO Chernobyl. Exactly the same bus as LAZ 695N, white and blue combination. But what the scariest part, lids are open for ventilation. So they drive in through the radioactive cloud in the Pripyat area, and instead of being sealed, they had to open the lids because buses were so hot inside. And here's the actual photo of Chernobyl evacuation. Exactly the same LAZ buses. And we have a militia Volga car in front of it. But let's go back to the photo that I mentioned in the beginning of this video. So this picture was taken in Minsk, capital of Soviet Belarusia. And I first assumed that it was taken in the late 70s. Now I'm thinking it probably was maybe very late 60s or early 70s. And on that photo you could see in the distance this monument. It is dedicated to the victory in the Great Patriotic War, and it's situated right downtown Minsk. And here's the nice aerial view, and I believe the bus was approaching from the right towards the monument. And the first giveaway, of course, is that weird looking car with a yellow license plate, and I don't recall seeing yellow license plates on the streets of Kiev back when I was a kid. That's because such license plates were issued between 1946 and 1959, so by late 70s, early 80s there were hardly any cars on the road still carrying a yellow license plate. And the car is quite unusual as well. It's a Czechoslovakian-made Skoda 1201 ambulance wagon. Apparently Soviet Union imported some of those cars back in the 60s, and that's the car that you see on the picture. And in front of the Skoda car is Gaz-53 truck. Once again, that front design was changed in 1975, so that's before 1975 model. And the truck has black background, white lettering sign, which was issued between 1959 and 1980. And that's pretty much the license plates that I remember when I was a kid. And after 1980, so that's Summer Olympics in Moscow time, the design was changed to match European standards. So it's a white background, black lettering, and this is how you see on this last bus. And of course, I need to mention that you don't see a single Lada or Zhiguli Vaz cars on the street. So that means this picture was taken before 1971, when Soviet version of Fiat cars started its production in Tolyatti, Soviet Russia. But of course, our main hero of this story is this bus. It's once again LAZ bus from Lviv, Western Ukraine, and there is so much to talk about it. That small bump on the roof at the rear of the bus, that's the air intake, and those type of buses were produced between 1958 and 1964. And if you look how generally this bus looks beat up, I'll assume it was in service at least maybe 5 to 10 years, so it puts us again in the end of 1960s. This picture was obviously taken in the summer, most likely July or early August. That's the hottest time in Belarus as well as Ukraine. And if you look closer at the bus, they have a roof vents open, so they're trying to get some fresh air inside, and also every side sliding window is open as well. So that's a hot summer day, and people inside are not having a good time. But of course, the wildest part of this picture and this bus is open engine compartment. And it's really unsafe to think about it. You drive in a city where there's a people on the streets, pedestrians, there's a curious kids maybe playing, there's a people riding bicycles, and you have exposed engine, which is of course extremely hot to touch. You can burn your hand, exposed belts, and they still drive right in the city with open compartment. And the reason for that, of course, engine was constantly overheating. And I don't want to say that Soviet engineers who designed this bus just did a poor design. It's a rear-based engine, so of course you have a restricted airflow, right? But the bus was designed as a intercity bus. You load the people, you get to the highway speed of 60 kilometers an hour, which is about 40 miles an hour, something like that, and you just cruise along. You have plenty of cooling coming into your air intake. Now you put this bus on the city streets where you constantly have to stop and go, and drive extremely slow. You barely get any air cooling to your engine, and now the only solution is have the compartment wide open, just provide any type of passive cooling, and it's really unsafe. And for pedestrians and other cars, and that thing can flop close any second. So yeah, it's pretty bad. As I mentioned earlier, when I posted this picture on Reddit and I claimed that this bus was called Dushegubka, the soul killer, quite a few people got offended and called me a liar. Well, I stay corrected. Dushegubka shouldn't be translated as the soul killer, because killing happens instantly. Gubit is more like it's when you wither. So it's a soul witherer. You slowly dying from heat in that bus. So this is what the translation Dushegubka. Also, Dushegubka was used as to describe German Gazetwagens. Those trucks they used to kill people with the engine exhaust. So that's kind of another similarity, because since the engine was in the rear, there was quite a few exhaust fumes due to rusty exhaust that was going into the bus itself. So besides the heat, there was also quite a toxic smell. So let's take a look again into the interior of the LAZ firm bus. Remember, there was a firm buses and plush buses. So this is the firm bus, and that's what we used in the cities. And as you see, this is actually even more modern, like newer model. They reduced the amount of sliding windows, and you see only one slider now on each side instead of every window having sliders. So they made situation even worse. My favorite spot if I ride this bus in the city would be staying here in the front right behind the driver's half cab, so you have enough view to see what's going on the road. But of course then you're kind of on the way of traffic of people getting off and getting on the bus. And the worst spot was the rear of the bus, because you sit literally on the top of the overheating engine, and of course your kind of airflow is trapped there, so that's the warmest air hot seats. So that was the worst location you can find yourself on an LAZ bus. But let's talk about LAZ bus in general. According to Russian language Wikipedia, LAZ 695 was Soviet and Ukrainian city bus, but it was a высокопольный автобус, high floor bus. So it has, I guess, buses with low floor and with high floor, and LAZ was high floor. So just like a Greyhound bus, if you ever rode a Greyhound, you know there's quite a climb to get inside of the bus. So that's, again, it's a high floor bus according to Soviet standards, and the lower space is used for luggage, right? And a city bus, that will be a low floor bus, which is easy to get on and get off. There's not many steps to climb inside of the bus, and it has way wider doors for easy ingress and egress. And there was a real city bus in the Soviet Union. It was manufactured in Soviet Russia, and the brand was called LIAZ. And those were real city buses. They had low floor, wide doors, and they were way better. They could fit so much more people, and had a different nickname. It was called Skatavoz, a cattle carrier, because people were packing in there like cattle in a train car. But we may talk about the cattle carrier in some other video. Today we're gonna talking about Dushegubka, the soul witherer. And speaking of the high floor buses, I took this photo during one of my visits in Kiev, Ukraine, and this old LAZ bus was converted into a coffee shop. And look at the steps they added just to get inside of the bus. And inside of the bus there's additional 3 steps, I believe, to get to the main floor. And you kinda can see on this photo too, look how high the bottom step is from the ground. If you look at engineering print, you could see some interesting details about LAZ buses. First of all, door opening is 870 millimeters, which is about 34 inches. So that's the total width, and then you have a folding doors inside of it, which reduces the space that you can get in and get off the bus down to 24 inches. That's how wide were doors when they opened, just 24 inches to get in or get off the bus. Also, if you look at the space between the seats, it's 500 millimeters. It's 20 inches. It's it. It's extremely narrow. So let's take a look at the floor plan of the cattle carrier, Liaz bus. That looks like real city bus, really wide entry doors, about 48 inches, and a lot of empty space, which is plenty for passengers to stand. Like the back of the bus had not a single seat, and that was really convenient. People could just gather there if they want to leave soon, and people who travel further, then they move in the middle of the bus. And the newer version of LAZ bus, which they began to manufacture in 1976, had exactly the same problems. So design-wise, they just made a flat front, but they had same problems because frame was pretty much the same, narrow doors, really tall bus, really tall floor, 3 steps to climb, and the floor plan was not much better. They slightly increased the gap between the seats in the middle. And if you watch my previous video about intercity bus service, the best bus we had was Hungarian, we call them Ikarus, and that was way better than anything we had manufactured in the Soviet Union, including Laz. And guess what? The best city bus was also made by Ikarus. You see, I'm posing here next to the Ikarus city bus. It had 3 doors, so it's a large bus, way bigger than Laz. Easy access, a lot of floor space, and they were roomy. They had way more windows to be able to be open, so it was way nicer bus. But can you guess what was better than Ikarus city bus? Ikarus extra long city bus. We had those 2, and those were awesome. We called them Garmoshka, the accordion. So that was pretty much a bus and a half. So they had the special articulated mechanism connecting another part of the Ikarus bus, and that one could fit a lot of people. And some of my YouTube viewers are wondering why I waste my time on Reddit, why I post pictures and I comment. I think it's extremely important to tell, I guess you could tell those kids about the realities of life in the Soviet Union, since I had a chance to experience it firsthand, and I have a pretty good English that I can explain my experiences pretty well, I believe. And it's scary because it's further this smoldering wreckage of the Soviet Union disappearing behind the horizon is more become some kind of religion. You know, just like religious people believe that Jesus was a tall white man with a beautiful beard living in the Middle East. Similarly, there's just new theory that the Soviet Union was the workers' paradise when you just, had 100% employment, 100% housing, cheap food, free healthcare. So that image is kind of worrisome. And if you bring just basic information how bad were Soviet bosses, people literally losing their shit and they post really angry comments. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this story, maybe learned something new. As always, don't forget to like this video if you liked it. Your comments always appreciated. Your super thanks as well. Thank you for watching Ushanka Show, and we'll talk to you soon. До побачення. In today's video, we're going to talk about intercity bus service in the Soviet Union and my personal experience traveling by bus from town to town. And just a friendly reminder, if you're interested in the topic of public transportation in the Soviet Union, I have a separate playlist and link will be posted below in the comment section. So recently I posted this picture of the Soviet era central bus station in my hometown Kiev in Ukraine. So this picture was taken sometimes in the early 1980s. And this is the place where I start my journey, and it's 250 kilometers from Kiev to the village in northern Ukraine. And I mentioned that this journey took us, my family, 12 hours, and has of course brought a lot of questions. About 50% of my viewers are from United States, so for you, my fellow Americans, 250 kilometers is about 155 miles. So if you do basic math, 12-hour trip to cover 155 miles, you're basically moving at the speed of about 11-12 miles per hour. And if we use modern days Google Maps, it will tell you that the distance between Kiev and the village Zhovit in northern Ukraine, that's where I spent all my summers, it's about 247 kilometers or 3 hours 44 minutes by car. Meanwhile, we used to travel for 12 hours. And when you talk about speed limits in the Soviet Union, so on the Soviet highways, I wouldn't call them highways, like Kiev and Chernigov were connected with the basic 2-lane asphalt road. So speed limit was 90 kilometers an hour or 55 miles an hour. But public transportation like inner city buses could go only as fast as 60 kilometers an hour, which is only 37.2 miles per hour. So pretty slow. But still, if you divide 250 kilometer distance to 60 kilometers an hour speed of the bus, plus maybe some stops, you should make that distance in about roughly 5 hours, while we were spending 12. So definitely math still doesn't work. A while back, one of my viewers posted how great was Soviet public transportation. Of course, he never traveled by Soviet bus. So I told him a quick, reference to my trips to my village. And he got super angry and, accused me of lying. And I was trying to find that conversation on my comment section just to show you guys, but unfortunately, maybe he deleted his account, but those comments are gone. But that was quite a lengthy conversation, and he accused me over and over again in lying and pushing pro-Western, anti-public transportation propaganda. Okay, so let me tell you about those bus trips that my family did every summer, traveling from Kiev, capital of Ukraine, to Zhovit, a small village in northern Ukraine, about 250 kilometers away. And before we start, I would like to answer one question: why we didn't use the train? Unfortunately, in the Chernigov direction, in that northern direction, there is no direct train connection, so you have to take several train stops, and just bus was working way better, so that's why we used buses and never used the trains. Although it's possible with several switch trains to get close to the village but not directly into the village. Okay, so of course we had to buy bus tickets, and my parents always tried to buy them way in advance. I think they were open to buy them maybe a month in advance or 2 weeks before the date of the trip. So my dad or my mom would travel to this central bus station in Kiev, which is about 40 minutes by bus, and I don't add that time to the travel time, okay? So, and then you stay in line. There will be special separate kassa ticket booth for advanced tickets, and if you're lucky, there will be no line. There usually was a line of people, so you maybe spend there 30 minutes, maybe an hour, and you buy advanced bus tickets for a specific date. And unfortunately, I don't remember the price. I believe maybe like 3 rubles 50 kopecks per ticket. So not cheap, but not really expensive. You may recall that Soviet workers had a really nice perk, 28 days of paid vacation every year, and you would get your отpuskneye, so like vacation pay,
before you leave for your vacation, so you get your monthly salary, and then in advance you get in monthly pay while you're on vacation. Of course, we didn't get paid a lot, about 150 rubles a month, but that was a nice perk to have an entire month as a vacation. And my family went to that village for an entire month, and of course I went if we go together in the beginning of summer, I'll stay there for entire summer, all 3 months. Okay, here I need to mention the term «счастливое советское детство», happy Soviet childhood, and I had that. I know it's kind of cliche, some people even made videos that it's like a myth about happy Soviet childhood, but I did have that because the place, that village, was my paradise. It's the place where it was always summer, because I go there for the entire summer for 3 months. I had no school, no homework, just my friends, staying with grandparents, and we just, chill, go fishing, go mushroom hunting, swimming in the river. So there's 3 months of paradise every year. So I had that beautiful destination that all year in school I was just waiting till I can leave Kiev and spend my next summer in the village. And I know everyone had a summer break, but the huge difference is that usually people, they go somewhere for a short time for vacation or whatever. Like my wife, she's an American. They will go for a weekend to stay with grandma, who had a little cottage in the other side of Michigan. But I was going completely out of city, so that was a completely different lifestyle. Of course, it was dirty because there's no running water, outhouse, all that stuff, but still it was fantastic. And of course, I wasn't the only one who had such arrangements. We're pretty much the generation of baby boomers that, like my parents, who left villages, moved to the large cities, and there was a big wave after Nikita Khrushchev allowed people who lived in the villages, collective farm workers, to leave and find jobs in the big cities. So then we were born in 70s, 60s, 80s maybe, and we still had our grandparents alive in the villages. So there was a lot of kids who lived in the city, but they spent every summer in the villages with their grandparents. And of course, I'm a grandparent myself now. I have a 5-year-old grandchild, and we babysit him sometimes, and I'm honestly horrified why and how my grandma agreed to babysit me for entire summer. We have him for a couple of days a week, and it's like, a lot of work, but this is entire summer, and my grandma still had to take care of chickens and pigs and her cow and a garden and feed me. And I was there when I was like baby, no diapers, so grandma will cut holes in my pants, and so when I play outside I can just do my business without stopping. So kudos to my grandma. Thank you, grandma. I apologize for that small detour. I thought it was important to mention about happy Soviet childhood. So on the day of a trip, I had to get up early in the morning, like 6 a.m. And my dad was always so nervous. I mean, for American, you hop in the car, you drive this 150 miles, whatever. It's not a big deal, right? People go to work 50 miles every day driving, quite a few of them. But my dad was so nervous that he'll have a diarrhea. So I remember there's while we're doing final preparations, packing, and waiting for our taxi ride, my dad will be grunting in the bathroom, sitting in the toilet. It's just like the worst time possible because, we're trying to use bathrooms as well. But he was so nervous to travel that he always would have diarrhea. And yes, I mentioned we had to hire a taxi, which was not cheap. We could use public transportation, but the problem was that since we had so much luggage, carrying luggage, it was about 15-minute walk from our apartment building to a bus stop, and then of course 40 minutes by bus. But carrying so much luggage that 15 minutes was pretty much impossible, so my parents had to hire taxi. So every year we used taxi twice, from our apartment building to the central bus station, and then when we arrived back, we'll also hire a taxi from the bus station back to our apartment building. And I remember it was such a great experience to be in the car. It was just like, wow, because you're only in the buses or trolley buses or subway. So being in the car
It's the only time I was in the car was pretty much right in the Volga taxi. And by taxi, there'll be probably about 20 minutes or maybe less to get to the bus station. There was not a lot of traffic in the morning, and generally there was not much traffic on these roads in Kiev back in those days in the 80s and 70s. But my parents were always worried that something will go wrong and we'll be late to catch the bus. So we'll arrive like hour and a half early, or maybe sometimes they couldn't buy tickets in advance, they will be sold out, but they will always keep some bus tickets to sell on the day of the travel. So we'll come that early, so my mom would run and get in the line to buy tickets. So I remember always the first part of our trip after taxi ride will be just hanging out at the bus station for several hours. So I'll be just playing, walking around, look at the buses, stuff like that. Of course, if I knew that many years later I'll be making videos and stories about my bus trips, I probably would save some bus tickets and would remember schedule. But I think our bus was leaving maybe 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, going to Chernigov. And as you just sit there, wait, and then finally you see this red and white boxy Ikarus 250 bus pull in, and it's time to get on the bus. You put your luggage below and then you get your seats. There was a previous generation of Ikarus buses. I don't recall riding it, but I probably did. I was just too young to remember. But that was this cool kind of looking 50s, 60s design bus. The nickname was Chimadan, the luggage, because the rear compartment where the engine was sticking out like a big case. And it's actually had a cool system, like almost it swings open as a gate and you have easy access to the diesel engine. So those buses were pretty much being phased out in the late 70s, early 80s, and we were riding usually Ikarus 250. And a quick side note about the location of the central bus station in Kiev. I'm not sure why, but it was quite a ways from the central train station. You would think it would be logical in centrally planned economy and centrally planned everything that you will place bus station next to the train station so then people can easily move between. It was quite a distance, for the city type. Like if you want to walk, it's about an hour between two stations, but we never needed to change, from bus to train. But I never thought about it, but I realized recently, like, wow, that's really stupid to have it so far away. And the final our journey would begin, and of course I'll be so excited because I'm going to my summer paradise. But when you're a little kid, every hour feels like 5 hours. So even the first leg is going between Kiev and Chernigov felt like forever, although it was about probably 4 hours if I remember correctly. And once again, speed limit 60 kilometers an hour, very slow, but they never build bypasses. So the trip, this 140 kilometers trip between Kiev and Chernigov, bus had to slow down to 25 kilometers an hour going through every village, and there's quite a few of them along the way. And then the first decent-sized town, Bravary, there was a bunch of stoplights, so you were losing a lot of speed and time going through all those villages in Bravary. Now they built a bypass around Bravary. Before that, it didn't exist. And of course, I need to mention that despite the fact that the Ikarus 250 was the best bus you can get in the Soviet Union, it was very comfortable, very nice, quite roomy. It didn't have air conditioning, so if you are riding that bus on a hot summer day, it could be pretty ugly, especially if you're on the side where the sun shines. And the only way you could get fresh air will be opening those little tiny windows, I call them lids. So there'll be like air vents on the top, and it's like a big lid you can pop open. But then of course, when the bus goes full speed, that wind that comes in, some people will start complaining it's blowing right in their faces. So they'll have this whole wars about trying to open to close. It was pretty ugly. So if it's a hot summer day, that trip was really not comfortable. Our first stop was a small town called Kazilets. It's about halfway between Kiev and Chernigov. And now they built the bypass. There's no more buses stopping there. And in fact, I checked, the bus station was closed down, and now there's like a grocery store there. But back in those days, bus would slowly go through town, then stop at the bus station, and we'll have like 20 minutes break so people can use the bathroom, stretch their legs. And that bathroom was the nastiest bathroom I ever experienced in my life. I had to stop my breathing, like it was
get some air in, like you dive in and you run in and try to use the bathroom as quick as possible, because there were just holes, on the cement floor, and then people who cleans them just dumping chlorine, so the stench was just unbearable. It was bad, but if you have to go, you have to go. And usually there were some vendors selling food. I remember there was always bilashi, it was like meat pies, deep fried meat pies for sale. They were very delicious, so we sometimes buy them to snack on. Although one time my dad ate bilash and it didn't have a good meat. It was bad meat, I guess, and then he had a horrible diarrhea for the rest of the trip, so that was a bad day for him. Then finally around noon we would arrive to Chernigov, which is another ancient Ukrainian town. It has beautiful churches. It's like 1300 years old town, and we stop at the bus station there, and that's where we get off. And in Chernigov they built it smart. The central train station and the bus station is right next to each other. As soon as bus stopped in Chernigov, my mom would bolt out of the bus and race into the station to get in line, because we're done with the first leg. Now we need to get tickets for the next leg, going from Chernigov to Shors. Now this town renamed back to original name Snovsk. And then that's another challenge, hoping we can get tickets pretty soon, because we need to make on time to the third leg going from Shors to our village. There were several buses going between Chernigov and Shors, so if you're lucky you can leave in an hour, maybe 2, maybe 3. Otherwise we just had to hang out at the bus station. I would walk around with my dad, maybe we'll check the train station, just killing time and hoping we can get on time, because our next bus was leaving, I believe, at 5:30 in the evening, going to the village. So this next leg between Chernigov and Shors, or now it's called Snovsk, was 70 kilometers. By car you can make it in 1 hour. It was almost 3. And once we're on the bus, and I need to talk about a bus now. So we kissed goodbye Icarus, and now we're riding on LAZ bus made in Lviv, and those were so-called hard buses. A while back I was talking about it. There was different type of seats, so this is way less comfortable. Bus itself was way noisier and it was way hotter. The way the rear engine was there, it was producing so much heat inside of the bus, so if you get the rear seats, you're gonna die in the summer. Same problem with ventilation, no air conditioning. So on a hot summer day, LAZ buses were they called them dushegubka, like soul killer, because people were fainting, just struggling riding those buses in the summer. And about halfway between Chernigov and Shors, Snovsk was a small town called Berezna. And actually I took this picture when we were traveling with my brother about 10 years ago. So that will be a small stop for 20 minutes to have a bathroom break, and then we'll continue our journey. And when we finally arrived to Shors, now once again, depending on what time I managed to leave Chernigov, sometimes my mom had to bolt again, run to the bus station to get in line, because once again we have to buy tickets for third and the final leg. It's between Snovsk, Shors, and the village, which is another 30 kilometers. And this is the picture of the bus station in Shors that I took, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, maybe 15, don't remember. Back then, in the 70s and 80s, it was a bustling bus station. There were people there from early morning to late night. There were buses coming in and leaving. There was just like a human anthill. So it's kind of sad to see that it's completely abandoned now. They shut down. Nobody using buses anymore. A lot of people got cars now, or there's just like a small shuttle service, but bus station is shut down. And I also need to remind you guys, there was no taxi service in that town. So if you miss the bus, you have to stay overnight on the bus station. Then early morning you can catch the bus to get to the village. And there were no people interested to take your money and drive their cars. So if you're stuck, you're stuck. And I believe that bus was leaving about 5 o'clock, so 1700, 5 p.m. And the problem with that bus, once again, was LAZ bus, hard bus, and it was designed, for inner city bus services, but they would sell any amount of tickets, so people would just cram that bus with their luggage, and that was nightmare because, if you ever rode the Greyhound bus, it's not designed as a city bus that people will stay in the bus, it's only for people sitting. So here people would cram everywhere, so it was bad. The distance of our final leg was only 30 kilometers, but that was a good hour because once again, well, the roads were way worse quality now. There was potholes, and once again, bus stops now at every village. Well, before Icarus will be slowing down because of speed limit. Here they will be stopping in every village at the bus stops, and people will get off. Some people maybe get on. So to cover 30 kilometers, which is, I didn't check how many miles, I don't know, 20 miles, maybe less, it will take a whole hour. And then around 6 p.m. that's when we will get into our village in Zhovid. So we left our apartment at 6 a.m. At 6 p.m. we finally at our destination. So 12 hours to cover 155 miles, 250 kilometers. And I actually remember because we will ask our bus driver, to stop outside the village, so we won't get off the bus in downtown. They call it downtown Zhovid, because it was another 2 kilometers to get to the place of my grandparents. So we will stay on the bus, and then we'll ask a driver to stop by the collective farm barn, and it was only 1 kilometer to our home, my grandparents' home. So that's when you get off and bus leaves. And then I remember this one time I'm standing there and I feel like my ears were ringing because all day I'm on the buses, a lot of noise, and suddenly there's like dead silence, and it felt so bizarre and awesome. Like you feel like you lost your hearing because you don't hear anything. It's just so quiet. So that's in a nutshell how you will spend 12 hours covering the distance of 250 kilometers. And of course, my parents then will have to go back to Kiev once their 1 month of vacation is over, if they came in June. And I'll stay all the way to the end of August. Then my mom or my dad will come, same route, to pick me up and take me back to Kiev. And I also need to mention that sometimes, maybe in early 1980s, maybe 82 or 83, they introduced the direct bus from Kiev all the way to Shors, or Snovsk, the new name. So that made a huge difference, because now we didn't have to, have this whole troubles of buying tickets in Chernigov. And bus was leaving like at 11 o'clock in the morning now, and we still could make it just fine to our final leg. So that improved our trips drastically when they introduced the direct bus, and it was Icarus all the way to Shores. That was amazing. And going back to Kiev was just as bad, similar pain in the butt. We had to get up super early, I believe like 5 a.m. because we had to get out on the very first bus going back. It was 5:30 in the morning, so we have to walk a kilometer with our luggage back to the road, to the main asphalt road, get on the bus, travel to Shores, run again into the bus station, get in line, hoping to buy tickets to Kiev if there was a direct bus, or before that going again through all that hoopla through Chernigov. So yeah, that was just as bad. And one time we had a very bad trip. It was me and my mom. My dad was gone already. So when we got to Shores, we discovered that they didn't have any more tickets. They were all sold out for direct bus from Shores to Kiev. So then my mom got finally tickets going to Chernigov. And it was a super hot day. She passed out on the bus because it was so hot. And when we got to Chernigov, we discovered there was no more bus tickets to Kiev that day. So we were stuck in that town. And finally she figured out to buy bus tickets to Poltava, I believe. And it was stopping in Nezhin, which is a train station. So then when we finally got to Nezhin, we had to drag our luggage to the train station. Then we took Elektrichka, so it's like a suburban train, electric train from Nezhin to Kiev. So we got home so late, like 8 p.m. or something. That was insane. That was like the worst trip. And I remember that trip because I was singing when we got up in the morning. I was just in a good mood, and my mom told me to shut up because singing early in the morning is a bad luck, and our trip was so bad. So since then, I never listen music early in the morning, and I never sing in the morning.
because I believe it's a bad luck. And speaking of trains, when I was in my late teens, so around 1920, when I purchased my bicycle Turist, and I have a video about Soviet bicycles, link will be below in the comment section. I wanted my bike in the village and I couldn't take it using the bus, so that's when I use train. And I figure out I can take train from Kiev to Nezhin. In Nezhin, I discovered there is a train going from Nezhin to Chernigov, so I had to wait there and of course dragging my bike. Then from Chernigov, I rode my bike 100 kilometers to village, and I did it twice. First time was really bad, I almost died, but 100 kilometers is like 60 miles riding the bike. So I did those trips twice, riding the bike all the way from Chernigov to the village, covering 100 kilometers. Then one year, almost by accident, I discovered that there's another way to get to my village without this grueling, challenging 100-kilometer bike ride, because I still wanted to bring my bike. I enjoy having a bike in the village because that's how you can get around quickly. So I've discovered I can take a train, once again, electrichka, like an interurban train, from Kiev to a small town of Bakhmach. So about 2.5 hours to get to Bakhmach, and from Bakhmach there's a train going to Snovsk or Shors, another 2.5 hours, and I had to wait in Bakhmach for another hour or so. But this way I could ride only for 30 kilometers instead of 100 kilometers. So I did that route a couple of times too. And my last trip to the village with my bike was back in 1994. And then of course in 1995 I traveled to the United States for the very first time to work in a summer camp here in Michigan. But of course it's a completely different story. So my trips to the village stopped since then, because every summer since 1995 all the way till 1998 I was coming every summer now to work here in Michigan, not going to chill and relax in the village. Okay, my friends, if you made all the way to the end of the video, thank you so much, and please don't forget to give me a like if you like the story. Your comments will be great. Super thanks as well. And thank you so much for watching Ushanka Show. We'll talk to you soon. До побачення. Goodbye.